Long before modern psychology emerged as a formal discipline, a German philosopher with a magnificent mustache was developing profound insights into the human mind that would later influence figures from Freud to Jung to existential therapists. Friedrich Nietzsche, often misunderstood and oversimplified, created one of the most nuanced and powerful psychological frameworks for human development ever conceived. At the heart of Nietzsche's psychology lies a deceptively simple yet profound challenge: become who you are. These words, borrowed from the ancient Greek poet Pindar, became Nietzsche's rallying cry for authentic human development. But what does this enigmatic phrase actually mean? How can you become who you already are? This apparent paradox reveals Nietzsche's radical understanding of human psychology. Unlike many philosophers who saw human nature as fixed, Nietzsche recognized that we are not born with a predetermined essence. There is no true self waiting to be discovered like some buried treasure. Instead, the self is something created through a challenging process of growth, transformation, and self-overcoming. What does your conscience say? Nietzsche asked. You shall become who you are. Notice the future tense. Becoming, not being. This is not about uncovering a static, hidden identity, but about engaging in an ongoing process of self-creation. For Nietzsche, authenticity isn't about finding yourself, but forging yourself. Most people, Nietzsche observed, never undertake this journey. Instead, they uncritically adopt values, beliefs, and lifestyles from their culture, religion, or social group. They follow the herd instinct, embracing conventional morality without questioning its origins or whether it truly serves their flourishing. They assume their cultural programming represents ultimate truth rather than recognizing it as one perspective among many possibilities. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe, Nietzsche wrote. This struggle isn't just external, but internal. The hardest chains to break are the ones we've internalized so deeply we mistake them for our own thoughts. True psychological freedom begins with the uncomfortable recognition that many of our most deeply held personal values are simply social conventions we've absorbed without examination. Nietzsche's concept of the spirit of gravity describes this tendency toward seriousness, conformity, and intellectual heaviness. We become weighed down by "thou shalt" commandments from external authorities rather than creating our own values based on what genuinely enhances our life. The psychological journey toward authenticity requires developing what Nietzsche called the spirit of the child, a playful, experimental approach to life that questions everything and creates new values and meanings. This brings us to one of Nietzsche's most misunderstood ideas, the death of God. Far from a simple atheistic statement, this was Nietzsche's psychological diagnosis of modern humanity's condition. The old moral frameworks and meaning systems that anchored Western civilization were losing their power, leaving humans without the certainties that had previously guided life. This collapse creates both tremendous danger and unprecedented opportunity. Without external authorities determining the meaning of existence, humans face the terrifying freedom and responsibility of creating their own values. Most people flee from this freedom into new forms of herd behavior, political ideologies, consumer culture, or secular religions that provide ready-made answers and relieve the burden of authentic choice. But for those courageous enough to face this existential challenge, the death of God opens the possibility for what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, or overman. Not a superior person in any racist or hierarchical sense, but someone who transcends conventional psychology to create their own authentic values. This psychological type doesn't seek external validation or follow established paths, but determines their own direction based on what Nietzsche called the will to power. This concept, too, is frequently misinterpreted. The will to power isn't about dominating others, but about mastering oneself. The drive to overcome internal resistance expand capabilities, and transform oneself into something greater. It manifests as the artist's creative urge, the scientist's search for knowledge, the athlete's drive to surpass limitations, any process where one overcomes resistance to express greater capability. And life itself told me this secret, Nietzsche wrote. Behold, it said, I am that which must overcome itself again and again. This constant self-overcoming defines Nietzsche's psychology of becoming. We are not fixed entities, but processes of growth and transformation. Our greatest fulfillment comes not from achieving a static identity, but from continuously developing new capabilities and perspectives. This psychology stands in direct opposition to comfort-seeking and contentment. Nietzsche recognized that growth requires resistance, challenge, and even suffering. His famous dictum, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," reflects his understanding that psychological development demands engagement with difficulty rather than avoidance of pain. The discipline of suffering, of great suffering. Do you not know that only this discipline has created all enhancements of man so far? This isn't glorification of suffering for its own sake, but recognition that confronting life's hardships, rather than avoiding them, is essential for developing psychological depth and resilience. Nietzsche distinguished between two fundamentally different psychological orientations. The slave morality develops in those who feel weak, oppressed, or powerless. It glorifies traits like humility, obedience, and pity while condemning strength, self-assertion, and ambition as evil. Its core psychological dynamic is resentment, or what Nietzsche called ressentiment, a festering hostility toward those perceived as stronger or more fortunate. By contrast, master morality emerges from psychological abundance and vitality. It values traits like courage, honesty, and self-reliance, while looking with skepticism on self-sacrifice and submission. This isn't about social status, but psychological orientation. Someone materially poor but psychologically sovereign exemplifies master morality, while a wealthy person driven by resentment and status anxiety remains psychologically enslaved. The path to authenticity requires transcending both these moral frameworks through what Nietzsche called a revaluation of all values. Rather than accepting inherited value systems, the psychologically free individual evaluates each value based on whether it enhances or diminishes life. Does a belief expand your possibilities or limit them? Does a moral principle express psychological abundance or scarcity? Does a habit strengthen you or weaken you? This process requires radical honesty with oneself, what Nietzsche considered the highest virtue. We are unknown to ourselves, we knowers, he observed. Most people lie to themselves constantly, disguising their true motivations behind noble-sounding justifications. The journey toward authenticity demands confronting uncomfortable truths about your desires, resentments, and self-deceptions. But Nietzsche's psychology isn't focused solely on the rational mind. He recognized that consciousness represents only a small fraction of our psychological processes. Your body, and its great intelligence, he wrote, does not say I, but performs I. Long before modern neuroscience confirmed the importance of embodied cognition, Nietzsche understood that wisdom resides in the body as much as the conscious mind. This holistic psychology acknowledges the fundamental role of drives, instincts, and emotions in human behavior. Unlike some philosophical traditions that see reason and passion as opponents, Nietzsche recognized their integration as essential for psychological wholeness. The authentic individual doesn't suppress instincts but redirects and refines them, transforming raw drives into creative expression. Nietzsche's psychological insights culminate in his concept of amor fati, love of fate. This isn't passive resignation, but active embrace of everything that has happened in your life, including mistakes and suffering, as necessary components of becoming who you are. My formula for greatness in a human being, Nietzsche wrote, is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. This psychological stance represents the highest form of self-affirmation. By embracing even life's difficulties as essential to your development, you transform resentment into gratitude and resistance into creative power. Nothing is wasted or regretted because everything becomes material for your ongoing self-creation. This connects directly to Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence, perhaps his most psychologically challenging idea. He asked us to consider how we would respond if told we must relive our entire lives, exactly as they've unfolded, infinitely many times. Would this prospect fill you with dread or joyful acceptance? This thought experiment isn't about literal reincarnation, but about the ultimate test of psychological affirmation. Can you embrace your life so completely that you would willingly live it again unchanged? Those who recoil from this idea reveal their fundamental life rejection. They remain trapped in resentment, regret, and the wish that things were different. But the person who can say yes to eternal recurrence achieves what Nietzsche called the ultimate psychological transformation. They no longer experience life as something that happens to them, but as their own creation and expression. They become, in the fullest sense, who they are. Nietzsche's psychology offers no easy 7-step programs or quick fixes. The path he describes is demanding, sometimes lonely, and requires tremendous courage. It means questioning your deepest assumptions, confronting your self-deceptions, and taking responsibility for creating your own values in a world without absolute guidelines. Yet this challenging journey leads to what Nietzsche considered true psychological freedom, not the absence of constraints, but the ability to impose your own meaning on existence and express your unique potential without being determined by external authorities or internal resentments. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star, Nietzsche wrote. The journey toward authentic selfhood isn't about achieving perfect order or certainty, but about transforming your inner complexity, including contradictions and struggles, into something beautiful and life-affirming. In a world increasingly filled with instant gratification and ready-made identities, Nietzsche's psychological insights remain profoundly countercultural. He offers no comfort to those seeking easy answers, but extends an invitation to those brave enough to undertake the most challenging and rewarding journey possible, becoming who you are.